What would it feel like to be free? Do you constantly try and make changes in your life but always slip back into old ways? I used to be constantly frustrated by my lack of willpower. What I never knew is that there was a reason why I could not control myself, and that there are processes that you can follow to regain your freedom. I interview some of the most knowledgeable and compassionate minds talking about breaking all varieties of bad habits and how to actually live a joyful and fulfilling life. Listen to the show and hit subscribe to free yourself from the shackles of the mind. And if you find some benefit, please share it with a friend and let's make the world a better place together. Welcome to the Break the Chain podcast. I'm here today with Mark Cowan. Mark became involved in the criminal world as a teenager. He developed a drug habit and was sent to prison at age 17. His lifestyle of incarceration and addiction continued for 20 years until he opened his eyes to the possibility of recovery while going through the drug court. 7 years on, he is now a qualified drug and alcohol clinician and has returned to prison to help people who are struggling with addiction as he once was. Mark, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Mark, if you'd be happy to share a bit of your personal story with us.
100%. Thank you. So my name is Mark Cowan. My family, got a bit of a mixture of a family. I was born in the islands of Rarotonga, and my mum is from Atitaki, and my dad is from a place called, it's part of Rarotonga, that's where we reside now. So my story begins migrating to New Zealand as a young person with my mum. So my mum brought us to a place in West Auckland. It was for some years. It's called Glenhaven. It's a little town. It's a little area nestled in between Blockhouse Bay and Avondale. So very poor. We were very poor when we were growing up. Very poor when we were growing up. So we migrated to New Zealand. My mum remarries again to my Samoan dad, and so life begins for us with without my, I didn't have my biological dad. He wasn't around, and so carrying on, not having my biological dad around, I was seeking for my own dad. So I was looking for my own dad. This continued, but when I maybe around the age of I think like 6 or 7, my mum becomes pregnant, has my sister, and so we become a blended family from that point. So, in a typical, I would say typical, for the time, there was cultural norms that was in our house, and that was the father is the chief of the family. Respect your elders, go to church, some things called doing your fe'aus, doing what is required of you. And so that was part of who I was. Very poor. We were really poor when we were growing up. Sometimes, we didn't have food and stuff like that in the cupboards, and we had to, do what we had to do, and that was okay. So as I'm growing up, I get more brothers and sisters coming along, and I suppose as I move into why it's important for me is that this isn't the truth, but it was my truth at the time, coming through, is that I felt like that I wasn't loved. So my dad was not around for me. My mum had remarried, and I built this. I built this inner dialogue, subconsciously and consciously, that I was not loved. So, as that is manifesting its way inside me, and me wanting to see my dad. So my dad comes back from Australia after serving a big lag over there, got deported back to New Zealand, and so I want to be with my dad. So, of course, I go with my dad, and he's this big time player in the drug world, and I get swept up by it myself. And so I get swept up by it, I go stay with him. My life's everywhere, all over the place. I'm starting to, hang out on the streets, smoking a bit of weed, smoking a bit of cannabis, doing a bit of crime, you know, and then what comes along after that? A lot of involvement with the police coming to our house and stuff like that. And so what transpires next is that I start using the drugs that was making money from my family at the time. So I start using these drugs, and I quickly become addicted to morphine. So they used to break it down. They call it home-baked heroin. I was like 15 at the time. And so I become it's a highly addictive drug. It doesn't take very much. They say 3 days of it, you form a habit from it, because it becomes physical. And so I formed a habit. I continue my journey in the world. But I suppose I was exposed to the world, and I suppose I was always searching for something, and I found it in drugs. It did all those things, it ticked all those boxes, made me feel wanted, made me feel loved. I had no problems in the world. Everything was like a bliss. I was 15, 16, added my youth onto it. I didn't care about anything. But as I transpired through this, I started getting into trouble. I got sent back to the islands. My dad sent me back to the islands. I was getting into trouble with the law. I'd started racking up charges. So I went over there for about 9 months. Continued on my journey of. I wasn't so much using drugs then, but my criminal lifestyle type of stuff. I was doing some dumb stuff over there. My family and Rara, I did something that was really stupid. I got caught for it, and so my family sort of pushed me to the side. Well, and so over in Rara, I was sleeping on the beaches and stuff like that, and I just really didn't care. Doing what I had to. I had to come back to New Zealand. I wanted to come back to New Zealand, so I stayed away on a boat. Jumped in the boat, head away on the boat, 7 days at sea. Back then, when the boat docked, you had to look over, because it was actually my mum's family that was on the boat. They were like part of the crew, and so when the customs jumped on one end, they just told me to jump off the back, and so I just walked into Auckland City, and that's where my life of crime, drugs, and whatever that really took this acceleration part. So accelerated really quite a lot. So 16, police are looking for me. 17, they catch me. Got all these charges, and they remand me in custody. And so at 17, I'm going to a prison setting with all these gang members. They were like killers. They were like whoever that was, of that time. And so, I was quite street smart. I was smart enough to understand that there were some rules going on around here and what I had to do. When I went in there, some of my dad's associates were in there. They took me under their wing and they showed me what to do. They taught me some of the rules, and of course I was quite unwell from using drugs, but I quickly adapted. I understood what was required of me. There were certain rules that you had to follow, but I quickly adapted. And when I went in there, it was originally like, damn, this is But then I soon learned that, and I could be, it wasn't that bad, as long as I stuck to a few rules. And some of those rules were like, never let anybody take anything off from you. You stand up for yourself, you don't take a backward foot to anything. Don't tell stories, don't tell bullshit stories. You're going to get caught out on them. And so, and I suppose that was me leading up to it. So 17, I'm in prison, I get released, and then that was in my mind, I was like, oh, if that's my deterrent, what I just experienced, if that's what prison is about, damn, I could actually do this, play this really well. I could get my needs met on the outside. I could make a bit of money. I didn't have no cares or anything in the world, and And if that was the consequences of my action, it wasn't that bad. So there, my life just revolved around drugs, crime, prison, the criminal fraternity, a bit of gang stuff, as well, Had my own neighbourhood gang and, moved to other prominent ones. But so 17 to 37 was a big chunk of my life, was just, so, it was, so what I've learned now today is that, my life at that time, I was naive to the world. I thought to myself, man, my naivety, those were my cards that was dealt. That was my life. So you know what? If that's my life, I'm going to live it to the fullest on what my life was being. So, I had kids on the way, I had relationships on the way, but I lived a selfish game for 20 years. It was all about me. It was all about drugs, fulfilling my needs of, of getting high. Like I said, my worldview, I was naive to the world. And actually, I didn't even really, maybe I didn't know, or I didn't want to acknowledge that you can live life without drugs, crime. So I became comfortable. I continued to sign, sometimes I'd be released. These are the worst moments I'm talking about. Sometimes I'd be released from prison. A couple of weeks later, I'd be back in prison again. There was hardly any Christmases that I spent out. I have a lot of kids. My kids were being raised by my mum and my dad, by my Samoan dad. I was really selfish. So as I'm transpiring through all this, I'm doing whatever I need to do to survive. But I suppose I started, and I 17 to 37 was really a blur of being in prison. All the stuff that I described. It was quite. There was no big wins in there. There was, sure there was money and everything else, bit of notoriety, sure, but there was nothing that stood out. But I suppose as I started getting a bit older, I don't know, there were many aspects to it, but things were changing for me. I started getting sick of being inside. My family were my family started to become like, they were, I don't know, my kids and that, they were, I don't know. But I started becoming tired of prison. I wasn't no young chicken, spring chicken anymore. And I just started getting sick of it. Started getting tired of the same stuff, and and I wanted to change, but I didn't know how to change. So I've been, I've got over 200 and something convictions. I've been to prison maybe 20 times, 30 times, I don't know. I've been to all the rehabs around New Zealand, in Auckland anyway. I've been multiple times. But for me, I think things were different. I had a great lawyer. He's passed away now. His name was Jim Boyack. And he... I suppose Jim never gave up on me wanting to get back to my family and get back to recovery. So with him as my lawyer, he always got me out. He'll do his best for me. He'd give me money when I'd get released, and he'll say, take care of yourself. He's just one of those guys that he had so much hope, and he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so one of those times came up again. He's like, Mark, you need to get into rehab. And I was like, yeah, sure, Jim. And so this occasion came up for the drug court. So, actually, take a step back. So it came up for the drug court, but I was sitting in prison. Me and some of the boys were sitting in there. We were watching a program, and the drug court came up. This is a new program for people in the criminal, criminal justice system. And again, I'm a major opportunist. I see opportunities, and I saw opportunity, and not in getting better, but in getting out of prison. I'm what they call a Section 12A and 12B, where there's no chances of bail you can get unless circumstances change. And this was a circumstance that was changed. So I went with my lawyer. We went up in front of the judge, and they put it off, and they said they're going to give me a chance. So what was different about this court was the judge was like, Mark, you can do this. And I was like, I actually didn't know what this was. There was a police prosecutor, they were my sworn enemy, the police. And even she was standing up and saying, we support you in doing this, Mark. And again, I'm an opportunist, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, oh, there's an opportunity. And they said, you could be a star. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And straight away I went to the end game. I was like, maybe. And so this was in November. And they said to me, you know what, we're going to release you to a rehab, but we're not going to do it till January the 14th. And, I was gutted. I wanted to go home, and, I just wanted to get out of prison, really. But actually, me staying in prison for Christmas Day, Boxing Day, it actually made me really, think about, shit. It made me really cherish, and start talking to myself, fuck, this could be the last time in prison, Mark, and I really, it was so beneficial for me, because I cherished, I sat there and I was like, fuck, Christmas Day, Boxing Day. I was like, fuck, I'm going to be getting out soon. What am I going to do? And so I went up. They released me. I went to the Salvation Army Bridge program, the day program at West Auckland. I got kicked out of there for threatening behaviour. And this is the irony. This is the irony of it all, is that I supported this person coming in. I wasn't taking drugs, but I thought I was the man running the rehab and stuff like that. But he made accusations against me that weren't true. I don't know what his purpose was, but the injustice of it all, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to do all this, but what it taught me was that actually, because this guy was drinking alcohol, but I just turned my back to it. I was like, nah, I'm not, what, this is not my thing. But what it taught me in that moment was I would never let anybody else get in the way of my well-being, of my journey, because I didn't say anything about it. And I was like, I'm not going to turn my back on anything that's in front of me that's going to jeopardize me and my family and everything else. And so I went on that journey, and I got kicked out. I had to call a peer support specialist in my team who worked for the courts and tell them to come pick me up. Man, it was so hard. I had to sit there, and I had to be like, oh, hey, can you guys pick me up? And I remember it clearly. I was standing there, and there's a fence behind me. And I was like, I could just jump this fence and shoot off, but I had to stay there. And they picked me up. I stayed. They took me to the judge, in front of the judge. And normally you get remanded in custody. But the judge, they sorted out a bed for me. Then I went to a place called Wings Trust. So Wings Trust is a residential program for pre and post treatment. And so I went there, and then I aligned myself to higher ground. So I went to higher ground after like an 8 week. So I had to stay at Wings Trust. I had to follow rules. I really got that foundational stuff. I had to get up at 7 o'clock every morning. And I hated that shit. I don't wake me up at 7, bang on my door. Man,
You're lucky it's only 7 there. It's 6 where we are.
Oh, 6. At the residential program. Yeah, and like they were banging, and I was like, I was like, but it taught me, like, man, some, I'm responsible here. And so I do it for 6-7 weeks. Everybody's telling me higher ground is like, and I was like, But I went into higher ground, and it was true. There were people pushing my buttons. I felt like they were pushing my buttons, but the biggest thing for me is like I got some gang tattoos on my neck, and when I went there, they were like, "Oh, we didn't know that you're part of a gang," and I was like, I was like, "Oh, okay," and they're like, "Oh, you have to make some phone calls and tell them you don't want to be part of them, or else you have to go, or else you have to leave." Man, I was bamboozled. I was like, I didn't know what to do. I like sit over here, but that's part of their approach. And so I had to go in a room. I thank the goodness that the phone number that I called, nobody answered. But I was like, okay, I went through it. But again, they had an impact. And of course, these guys are like, so smart. Like it made me think in those moments: do I want to be here? Or do you, like, what's your options? And it was like, from then on, I was all in, I was like, man, I gotta be, people were telling me you can't be half-assed, half all in. And I was all in. I did the program, I was all in. It was lonely at times, because all the people that I knew from, prison and all that, they were in there too. And I would walk past them, and they'll be in their rooms, and they'll be like doing whatever they do, and I'll be like, "Hey, what's up?" And they'll be like, "What's up?" But they understood, I was on a different journey from them. I was like, they were doing whatever they were doing, but I was like, I told them, I was like, man, please, I don't, man, I'm here to, I'm here to do this, get well, and be with my family. And so in the program, the program taught me so many things. Taught me that I was an all or nothing type of character. It taught me that my family were like. It taught me that I owed so much to my family. It just taught me. It taught me how to be sociable. Sort of, I was still quite aggressive in my tone, the way that I would talk to people. It taught me that. It taught me so many things. It taught me so many things. I finished the program. I graduated in level 3. That was and I was all in, and they understood that. I feel like they had conversations with me. They said, when you're 2 years, come back, we want you to work at the program. My 2 years came up, and I went and worked back at higher ground, and it taught me so many good boundaries. And then so I worked there, it was my first job ever, like I've never worked in my life before, I may have been a wing cleaner or, but I've never had a job, like, so it just taught me so many things, the high ground, like, and the staff there, they were top notch. And so, and then a job came up for the drug court as a principal specialist. I went over there, I applied for the job, I got it, and then I stayed there for a couple of years. And then during that time, I went to Te Taketake, so it's a AOD counselling program. It has a Te Ao Māori and a academic European approach. It blends the two and together to help, collaboratively to help support tangata whaiora. And so I went there. I passed by the skin of my ass. Went down the road crying and that. Like just because I knew that like it was going to be what. And that was before it all. And so I managed to do that. Then I came back up to, I'd done all that at Odyssey House for the drug court. I went in and a clinical role came up to work at the prison. Fortunately for me, the Department of Corrections accepted me back into the prison. And I went and cut my teeth as a clinician up at the prison. It was so challenging for me at the time. We had to write these flash reports for the parole board. We had to do one-to-ones. We had group work. However, I felt like that was my calling at the time. I left that job not because of the work, but because of the manager that was running the service at the time. I follow. If you're my leader, I will follow you. If you're if you're making sure that the rules that you implement that they are followed as well. And I couldn't carry on with that manager in place. So I left. I went to work for the Odyssey Youth Program. Getting young people ready for residential program, doing assessments, getting them ready for the program, for the residential program, and then I moved into I worked for Emerge Aotearoa as a senior clinician, but now I am the manager of a service for youth 12 to 24. But I also have my other ambitions as well. So I've got a business myself. So I've written cultural reports for some time for the for the Ministry of Justice. I really like that work for me. It was a lot, but I would meet with people who are incarcerated or who are in the community, many people who are in prison, and we would go over their life story. So, and of course, aligning that, understanding where people, like my story I just shared, and how people got to where they are today, because we don't just turn up one day and it's like, oh, that's, there is a backstory to it. There is key moments in life. And I really felt like I love talking to the people about that. I like exploring their story. I didn't like so much writing it up, but I love just talanoa. And so I did that for quite some time, which was quite good. Of course, the funding recently got pulled from it. And so, but within that, I am currently doing some one-to-ones with some young people, doing a little bit of clinical supervision, but just building my business. Autara te manako. So autara te manako in my language, the Kukana language, means to. So a brief overview of autara means to talk. Manako is talked about pain, or talk about manako is the head. So it's about talking about what's going on for you inside your mind, a healthy mind. So I do a little bit of work in schools, mainly for my children's school. I do a little bit of work. I do a bit of Kiorahi program running there. And I'm just building up my brand and stuff like that. So that's me, James.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story. It's amazing. It is amazing. I just can't even comprehend what it would be like after a 20-year cycle of crime and addiction to actually make that change. I mean, when I have tangata whaiora clients come in who I'm dealing with, one of the first questions that I ask them, across, because the program we do is 8 weeks, is like, how do you think that it is that you can come in here with an active addiction and leave in here in 8 weeks as someone who no longer is in active addiction, who actually has a mentality for what we call recovery, which is quite, and there's another question I'll ask someone every week: what is recovery? What is it? and then see what they can muster, what they can come up with. And that always changes a lot over those 8 weeks. And we always, I always hope that someone's going to come in to the program with a sort of attitude that you have, rather than, like that you're talking about. There's a difference between, the headspace that you was in when you were actually determined that I am going to become well now, and many people who aren't that bothered about that. What was it for you that actually really made that big change? What was the shift for you, and what do you think was the thing that needed to happen for you to go to someone who was in an addict mentality to someone who was in a recovery mentality?
That's a great question, a tough question, because I don't think there was one moment. I think there were it was layered. One of them was I was getting sick and tired of prison, the I had done everything, the notoriety behind it. Things were changing in the prison system, the rules that I came in on, a lot of it was changing. There was a lot of changes in there. I suppose another thing was, I would like to say it was around my family, but I can't actually sit here and be a hand on heart and say that was part of it. But I remember pretty clearly. I think this was part of me wanting to change. I think it was happening internally, and I was like, oh man, I was getting sick of it. So one thing that I always reflect on is my partner at the time. She was pregnant with our first child together. I asked her to bring some, of course, some drugs in prison. That's what we do. That was my same modus operandi. Nothing had changed. So she comes in. She's got a big heart, so she brings me these drugs. Of course, they're keeping an eye on me. They know what I do, and so I bring these. I put these drugs away. They come in, they break up the visit, and they're like, "Okay, you're seen on camera, la-di-da." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." They take me downstairs. They put me in a round room. So a round room in prison is a cell with nothing in it. And they got some padded walls, and they just leave you there. So they give you a little something, one of those. It's all cardboard. It's a urinal, or they give you somewhere to take a shit in. It's just like a cardboard, and you got nothing. So you gotta. They take the mattress out during the day, and they just give you this sheet, and you're in the nude. And so they left me in there for 3 days. I started going a little bit nuts, and I was like, oh, damn. Of course, I still had the drugs. And then they released me on the 3rd or 4th day. They released me to another unit that's next door to it, and I'm like, oh. And I go in there, and I'm like, yo, party time. So they come up, but this moldy lady, Mao is her name. She's been an officer, and I've seen her before, and I thanked her for these moments. But she came into my room, and she was like, she could talk to me on how she wanted to talk. She was one of those officers, they you ask her for something, she would tell you, get stuff, or, we respected her. She was like, how dare you, Mark? And I was like, what do you mean, Mark? She goes, how dare you ask your 9-month pregnant missus come into the prison and bring you drugs? And I was like, no, I got nothing. She was like, I ain't dumb. I don't know who you think you are, da-da-da. And I was like, And she closed the door and went. That night, she got me, I had some meth, I did what I did, I took it, but man, what she said to me, it just sat in my mindset. And I remember writing this big ass letter apologizing to my partner at the time, but I was outside of my brains, I was goners. But it really, it had this effect on me where, it really dug deep, and it made me think, who was I to ask, she could, she could have ended up in the prison next door with my baby inside her stomach to satisfy my needs. And I was like, damn. And then after I had taken all the drugs and all that, I started doing these little things, if I know if drugs are coming into prison, in my unit, I knew that, who had it and all that. I started pushing myself away from it, I started doing laps by myself, and they're like, oh, is that us? And I'd be like, nah. This is the first time ever in my life that I've ever turned down drugs in prison, and things just started to change, and then the drug court came along, and then, I think I was ready for whatever, and I think, I can't pinpoint one thing, but there were all these things that were going on for me, and I was like, oh, but that was a big one. That was a big one.
Yeah, it's amazing how in addiction we just can lose sight of other people and the consequences it might have on them, and what our behaviour is doing to them. It's not. I always feel like addiction. It's not like intentionally selfish, but it is unbelievably selfish. But you just don't. It's like apathy. You just don't think. You just don't think about it, and it's amazing that was a moment that actually had a big breakthrough through for you. Because I honestly believe the more we make ourselves care about other people, the stronger of a protective factor that actually is against using. It certainly has been for me in my life. The more I care about other people, the more I actually go, I can't do that. I can't use.
That's right.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about the drug court, because many people, this is Podcast International, and a lot of people that listen to that won't have a clue what the drug court is. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The drug court is a program run by two judges originally set it up, Judge Aiken and Judge Chumuan. One is what I call a judge who sits in the Waitemata Court, and Judge Aiken sat in the Auckland District Court. I had relationships with them both prior to being accepted into the drug court. So the drug court is a program that helps support people with a sentence of 3 years or less to help support them with their recovery journey. So what would happen is that you would go in front of a judge, you would have a determination hearing, and they would decide whether they would put you into the program. So, and then once you're into the program, you would remain in custody until a bed was available for whatever your pathway was. So for me, well, let's talk about somebody else. Say somebody was in the courts for for drunk driving, their program would be tailor-made for their journey. So if it was say if it was for drink driving and it was quite they were looking at a year's probation or something like that. They would go to do the Salvation Army day program, something like that, or maybe they would have to go do the residential program, and then they would do follow-ups. But the important part of this was the drug testing. So there's drug testing twice a week, and there's consequences if you don't attend those drug testing. Say somebody again who was a drink driver, they would, but maybe if they would have those blow things in your car, they would set all that stuff up. So that would be one end of the spectrum. And then I'd say for somebody like my case, they would remain in the program for say 12 months, whatever was suitable for them, or whatever the program that was made. So if for example, for me, I stayed in the court for 22 months or 20 months, 22 months. I had intensive, I was deemed, quite a lot. So I had, residential program, follow up, I remained in the court for some time. So essentially what the drug and alcohol court is it helps people to, stop, first of all, to stop, the crime and the associated drugs and alcohol. No, not to stop, but to help support them to stop. And it holds them accountable by having, putting them into rehabilitation services, but also holds them accountable for, drug testing as well. So, with all those foundational stuff in place, it's, you're either going to go two ways. You're either going to go all in or you're just going to go. And, they have court every 2 weeks. You have to attend every 2 weeks. If you are not, say if you broke some of your conditions, then you have to go up every week. Some people get put back in custody quite a lot of times, if they haven't fulfilled their requirements. So, yeah.
It's an amazing program. I've been and sat in there a few times and just watched and observed, because one of my friends was doing a documentary on it, so I used to go in sometimes and have a listen. And it's amazing, isn't it? Because it seems like they've tried to take the kind of the power balance out of the or at least in the presentation between the judge and the police and everybody. It's kind of like it's all on one level, isn't it? And it's quite weird. They're kind of all sat around the computers, aren't they, in the middle? Is that the one? That's the one, right? Yeah. And it's like, it was interesting how you'd had that kind of observation that the police are supposed to be my enemy, but they're like cheerleading me on and trying to encourage me and stuff. And did you feel like it was kind of like really was kind of like bringing two worlds together in a way? Like, did you feel like you had like a new appreciation and understanding of the other side kind of thing?
Wow, it was a really weird concept, because when you go in front of say you committed some crimes and you go up in front of the judge, the next day or whatever. So generally you apply for bail. The prosecutor was like, nah, no bail for this guy, and so they were like considered, like, it's my enemy, And then you've got a judge and a judge that's there that's almighty, who's got the power to release you or to thing. And it was like, it's often a conversation we would have downstairs before we're going up. Who's the judge on today? Whether they're empathetic to the cause. And if they weren't, then, you'd be going back into custody. But it was a really, when we came in and I sat, we stood, so the judge doesn't sit up, she comes and sits where the registrar sits, so everybody's on the same level. And when they're changing, when their rhetoric is changed to a supportive stance, it's very hard not to take heed to that. It's like, oh, whoa, and so even though at the time I was nodding my head to them, but like, yeah, thanks. I was inside, I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? So it's like, the concept is pretty out there. Well, not today, but back then it was.
Well, it's still not something that many countries do, as far as I'm aware. It's still something that's quite unique to Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's but I mean, it's like, because obviously you went through 20 years of the prison system, and then after that, do you think if you had something like that, many years earlier, it would have been helpful to you at the time?
James, that's a tough question. Because like, would I have been ready back then at that time? Would I have actually understood it and grasped it for what it was? It's very tough to answer. What it could have been. Most definitely. If I had something like that 10 years ago, 10 years ago when I was going through, quite possibly, yes. And I suppose you ask the question, do you, is it worth that, doing that then? Of course it is. You know what I mean? 10 years earlier, for me,
I'm always asking myself that question, like I've, dealing with people, trying to help them to get into recovery. And it's like you was mentioning earlier about the worldview that you have, and that kind of shapes everything, doesn't it? Coming from that worldview. And it's like, what is it about that worldview, and how is it that worldview can adapt to actually to take on this attitude towards that's actually going to help them to get better. And it's really interesting, isn't it? That's always a question. It's like, how do you recover, and how do you want to recover? Because it's like, when you're using, you might go. It's like addiction's such a nightmare, because it's like you can, like, your life can fall into pieces, and you're like, I really, really want to stop using drugs and alcohol 100%. I'm totally sick of it. I absolutely had enough of it. And then in the 2 minutes later, you're just like, I really, really want to use. I want to use more than anything. Like, I really, it's like 100% in both directions, isn't it? It's like such a nightmare. So, yeah, still trying to figure that one out, and whether there's a way that, but it's like, as a clinician, that when you're dealing with someone, it's only going to be as good as that they're interested in it. Doesn't really matter what you tell them. You just hope that you can throw some seeds and that they're going to water those seeds. But it's really nice to work with someone who's really ready, isn't it? It's a wonderful thing. How do you feel like your personal addiction and your experience with addiction and experience in the incarceration system affects your approach to counselling and dealing with people now?
So my approach, so I'm currently doing some work from the organisation that I'm employed with up at the prison at the moment. So I've gone back there. I'm helping support some of the group work. And so I've had to look at my my approach, especially in the group sense, because a lot of the people in there I'm so relative. It's so relative, but a couple of things that I always like to do is I try to be really authentic. I think that's, for me, it's really important. And I suppose, that's a big one for me, being really authentic. And I think coming to people's levels, I think is really another thing that's something that really benefits me, because I understand I really back myself when it comes to relationships. So, whether that be relationships in the room, whether that be relationships with others, I consider myself quite an observer, so me understanding the room, me understanding people, if I'm come in a room and we're doing counselling and stuff like that, but you're, not with me, we can change the conversation, no problem at all. And I'm fluid like that, another thing I really like to do is I'm also learning. I'm always open and teachable, I may be the counsellor, but I'm also the learner in the room, and I think that just brings that, I'm the expert in my life. I'm not the expert in your life. I think those are some of the fundamental stuff that I like to do. I like to come to their level, like to be authentic, but I'm open, man. I'm learning from you just as much as that, we're learning from each other. Those are some good fundamentals for me.
Yeah, nice. I agree. Yeah, totally. Well, one of the other things I've heard you describe is that your job is to give people hope. What are some of the ways that you give people hope?
Well, my story, of course, and I suppose that's the essence of why I'm here today, because, when you asked me, I was like, and for a while for me, I have been what I'm realizing again, because I'm always learning, is that I've got a strong story, and I need to be more active in sharing that story. I've transitioned through. I was a clinician. My story was really forefronting it. Then I moved into I moved into a bigger organization, which do a lot more work with a lot more people. So then now I manage a service. So I've lost a little bit of that, being that, talking about hope and stuff like that. And so I think this is one way to help support that, support the understanding of hope. But I suppose in a macro way, it's my story sometimes. But of course, as clinicians, we're taught only talk about your story if it's if there's a purpose or beneficial towards it, And so, but I suppose it goes. There's a more deeper sense to this actually. It's the people that mean the most to me, and that is my family. I am that guy today. I am that guy for my family today. I'm that one. I believe I'm that one. If I can just get my kids to see that there's hope. Look, even though they're so used to me now, but my dad was like in the gutters, not how many years ago. Now I look at him, even though we don't appreciate that stuff as much as we could, we're the beacon, And sometimes you don't, when you ask a question like that, you're like, oh, but when you think about it more, that's our role, it comes effortlessly, but it doesn't come with that much appreciation sometimes. Because we just roll it out and we just continue on and we become normalized. But actually, we're that hope. You're doing this thing and spreading the word out there. Maybe somebody might pick it up one time and be like, yo.
It's amazing. I look back at my own recovery journey and I just think of there's these shining moments when someone has said a paragraph or sentence or just even the fact that they believed in me and that I could do it, and they just still shine so bright today as moments that actually changed my perspective. Just them amazing things, them a few words that were said, and they wouldn't have thought anything about it. They wouldn't even, and it's just I can't believe how much those things have stuck with me, and just changed the way that I'm looking at the world. Like what the lady said to you the night when you was in the round cell, or the night you got out of there, and so many, and the police saying that they believed in you and supporting you and things like that. How encouraging it can be. Because I really think that stories are super powerful as well, and one of the most powerful ways of spreading hope. But then I also look at some of the clinicians who I work with, and they don't have addiction background, and I'm always in awe of how these people can go into that setting and do that job, because I wouldn't dare. I would find it so hard, because addicts are a pain in the arse. They're so difficult. They're so difficult, and they're always like, oh, you don't know what it's like. And then these people go in there and they're amazing. Some of them are just so good at their job and so good at building hope. And I think one of the reasons behind that is because behind the addiction there's so much going on, and that people, they don't think that they're loved, and they don't have self-esteem, and that they're working with so many things other than the superficial addict stuff. There's so much underneath and behind that what a person really believing in you and really caring about you can have such a huge impact on you, even if they haven't been an addict. So that's one thing, anyone listening to this, someone doesn't need to be an addict to help you and to get it. I think that's a big thing.
I could see that it was impacting you, the hope stuff, I was looking at you, it's really something at the forefront for you.
Yeah, hope, it's a big one. It's because it's the number one on the. Have you read them? SAMHSA's recovery principles. It's the number one principle of recovery. Hope. They put that one at the top. It's a big one. I think I have to remember that one at work sometimes, because maybe it'll be a little bit too harsh, a bit too tough. You need to remember to be doing the hope stuff as well. Some people are like, it's always so negative in here, just can't we do some more fun stuff? It can be a bit harsh. I mean, hats off to you as well, because you didn't make it through the bridge, you've made it through higher ground, which is always, people always go, oh my God, higher ground, I don't know if I can handle that. Did they have no mobile phones when you was there?
No. At the high ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But they still have no phones there.
No mobile phones, yeah.
No mobile phones. A TC, I think there's like 40-something people there, like 80 eyeballs looking at you, It's like, oh my gosh.
I heard there's one day where they make you wear something that you hate wearing or that you don't like. Is that still a thing?
Well, there's many tales that come from there. They're pushing in the chairs. You call out Central, everyone stops. It's a crazy thing. Somebody says Central, everybody stops. And you can only say it if you're at a certain level. But it's like, wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, it's so interesting, isn't it? And it's definitely, it's definitely hardcore, but it sounds like it has an amazing impact on people's lives if you can get through it. If you can get through it, because it feels like some people feel like they're in prison in these places, and you can walk out the gate at any time. It's trippy that you can just
honestly. I can walk into a wing of prisoners, all these badass people and all that, and having to survive, having to go through that program was a lot tougher than any prison time, or it was so outside the left field, it was so anyway, yeah. I think there's some trauma stuff from there that still probably goes on.
It's hard. There's nothing harder than having to change your own behaviour. It's like unbelievably hard. I mean, like you'll know, we go through. You get rid of the addiction stuff or the acute I need to use drugs and alcohol right now stuff. You get rid of that, and then you look at the other stuff. You're like, ugh, oh my god, there's so much crap here I've got to deal with, and then like I'm still dealing with all these things, and I know that every time I deal with one of these things, I see the next ugly thing that I've got to deal with, and it's it's the reality of it, isn't it? And still these things are hard to change. Eating things for me, I'm really on a journey with trying to sort out my eating, and I quit one thing, and then there's the next thing. It just moves, it hops, and it's just like whack-a-mole, just trying to get rid of all these bad behaviours. Amazing. So, do you think there's any misconceptions with how people who are involved in crime and stuff?
Misconceptions? What do you mean by that, James? What does that mean?
Just because people can be a little bit judgmental of people who are in the prison system, and do you think that there needs to be a shift in the way that people are looking at people in this situation and the way that it's dealt with?
Ooh, from my point of view, I believe that there is a place for, you need to have a prison system, prison. I suppose if we think about it on the, it's a really tough question. That's a really, the approach that they're like for the drug courts, that sort of stuff is coming in. I think that is, there is a need for that. The media these days, the things that are pumped up these days, it's really shines on things that is, I hear so much stuff, I don't even know what to believe, is there a place for the criminal justice system? 100%. Is there a place for, say, example, people like myself who are lost in there and don't know how to get through? Of course. But I suppose, James, in our roles and what we do, it's up to people, if they're not ready, then you're not ready, and that's the challenge, If you're not ready, then no matter what we say to them or what our stories are to them or whatever that may be, if people are not ready, they're not ready. Yeah.
Yeah, we was watching this program a little while ago where they was doing a prison experiment, and the deal was that they can have the doors open. They don't lock the doors every night if they behave themselves. And the police and the guards don't come in unless they have to, and they basically just manage themselves. and it worked kind of okay, and then it fell to pieces, and then they weeded out a couple of people that were kind of like instigating the whole thing. Who were clearly the people that really just nothing was going to work for them. Took them out of there, and they managed to kind of maintain this really nice culture within there. So I think there's definitely there's different ways that things could be done, and I wonder if it, like, more, maybe not like as much as being in a drug and alcohol residential rehab, but like bringing a bit more of that into the prison as part of the process. I wonder if it might help. I could see that a lot of people imagine, trying to deal with the topic of forgiveness in prison. That might be pretty intense, but
I honestly, we spoke about it earlier, change, like for these organisations to implement change, like say Department of Corrections. Yeah, we're a long way off it, James. You know, like that would mean changing the mindset. That would mean, you know, changing old ways of being. Yeah, it's you know, it's easier to stay in the same, James, as you know. You know, it's easier to do the status quo than having to change things. Yeah.
If you could speak to your younger self, still caught in that cycle of addiction and crime, what would you say to yourself?
James, you're taking from my line. This is the questions that I ask in group work. Okay, tell me the question again, please.
If you could speak to your younger self, still caught in that cycle of addiction and crime, what would you say?
Oh, my Lord. What would I say? This thing that keeps on coming back to me, you know, with the understanding in my mind that actually, you know, that there is, you know, like, because I know my younger self is going to reach somewhere, you know, where I am today. So with that in mind, that is sort of I'm thinking about it, but it'll be okay. You know, like, that's all I really can say. That's all that's coming to my mind, James. I mean, like, my journey has been my journey, and I wouldn't change it, you know, like, so I feel like I'm like, oh, but just telling my younger self, it's going to be okay, you know, we're on this trajectory, whatever, you know, you're going to do, you know, you're going to do, but it will be okay. We'll be, you know, we'll get to where we need to be. And I suppose, because I do talk, like, when I represent myself, when I have these conversations, when I do some meditation, I reflect back always to that younger person, you know, and if I look back, and I just have to tell them it's going to be okay. It's going to be all good.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I'm very grateful. And you've got a really interesting and colourful and inspiring story. And to get out of that cycle after 20 years I find that quite remarkable. And I hope that some people listening find that really inspiring as well. So if you've got any final words you'd like to say, you're welcome.
Yeah, I know my kids will be listening into this, and you know, I just want to got to give them a shout out, you know, just that, I always tell them I love them, you know, so I just want to remind them that I love them, and but also, you know, thanks to you, James, because, you know, often we just carry on in our lives, and having these moments to be emotional and to bring some of that stuff up is like, you know, because we just carry on, you know, life just grabs a hold, and not until we're able to sit down and have, you know, like, to be able to reflect on where we've come from, what we've done, and, you know, I think, I thank you for that, James.
Thank you very much, Mark. Listen to the show and hit subscribe to free yourself from the shackles of the mind. And if you find some benefit, please share it with a friend, and let's make the world a better place together.